Welcome, everyone. I'm your moderator, Rochelle Sikowski, Digital Marketing Manager here at Jacada. It is 1:01 Eastern Time. Thank you for joining today's webinar entitled 5 Ways Intelligent Automation Customizes Customer and Agent Experience. Our presenters today are Lori Buckland. Lori is president of Strategic Contact, an independent consulting firm that helps companies optimize the value of their technology and operations. She's a recognized industry leader with a passion for helping centers achieve their goals. And Scott Merritt. He's our Vice President of Automation and Marketing here at Jacada. He's a passionate advocate of responsible RPA, having spent the last 15 years embedded in the process automation and RPA, performing over 100 process automation assessments and supporting over 50 implementations. Today, Lori and Scott will discuss how to unburden your agents with intelligent automation technologies and make agent experience a priority in this customer-focused world. Following the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A window at any time during the event. Again, to honor the privacy of all of our attendees, only your name will appear in the attendee window. So let's begin. We will start the conversation with Scott. The presentation is all yours, Scott.
All right, great. Thanks, Rochelle. And thanks everybody for joining us today, wherever you are in the world. Looks like we have a pretty good crowd on hand, ready to dig into this intelligent automation topic. But before we jump in, I wanted to just provide a little bit of background into the inspiration and behind our session. Based on our backgrounds, I think it's pretty clear that we're both passionate, both Lori and I, about contact center operations and finding ways to help our customers simplify their customer service operations environments. But I think the spark that lit the fire for this effort goes back to early summer when Lori released the results of her annual customer surveys. They are the customer contact challenges and priorities for 2019 and the future of the contact center, optimism with a dose of caution. So this year was, I think, interesting to me because there was significant alignment in the priorities and the challenges that many of our clients were trying to solve for as they continue down and struggle through this digital transformation journey. So I thought it was a great opportunity to reach out to Lori and her team and really connect and understand and share some stories about our customer pain points and understand some of the technology trends that she's seen out in the marketplace and how she's going to bring in those two together to provide solutions and suggestions to her client base. And so we gathered together, talked about these opportunities, and we thought it would be a great opportunity to connect on two things. Number one, pull together an infographic that summarized not only a lot of the findings from Lori's research and customer surveys, but also collected, a couple customer surveys over the last couple of years and really tried to identify not only business pains and trends in the marketplace, but also some of the new technology trends and see if we could match those up and provide some new and interesting insights into what is a very confusing technology marketplace as we look at our digital transformation efforts. And so the outcome number one was the infographic that Lori and I produced and released about a month ago to the marketplace. And then outcome number two was really to dig a little bit deeper, peel back the layer of that infographic and really walk through some personal stories that Lori has out there in the marketplace with her clients, and also share some of my experiences on how we see the market and how we see customers advancing over the next couple of years relative to their pains and their technology opportunities. So without further ado, let's get started. Lori, are you ready to go?
I am ready and excited to have this discussion.
Awesome. All right. So first things first, as we looked out over your surveys and we scanned the marketplace, I think one thing that became very, very evident is that self-service rules the world. It continues to be the number one driving force behind many of the digital transformation efforts. And the reasons are obvious. Customers are driving it. Customers are requesting these multi-channel, omni-channel experiences. And businesses obviously realize the benefit from being able to provide that for their customers, not only for the cost benefits, but also the opportunity to simplify the customer experience. So as we look at our data and we kind of summarize it in this infographic, a few of these stats were very interesting to us. The first one is, the top 25% of customer service operations will use some kind of virtual customer assistant by 2020. Probably not a surprise to a lot of folks on this call. I'm sure many of you have implemented some type of virtual assistant, some kind of chatbot out there. What's interesting in the data, though, as we continue to see kind of that first wave of lessons learned come back from the marketplace, is that, in this 7 out of 10 customers or consumers prioritize consistency, a consistent experience across those channels, but only 29% say that they get it. Furthermore, point number 3, when we look at this 60% stat, 60% of companies think that they're providing that great mobile experience, but only 20%, 22% of those customers feel the same. So this is, Lori, something that we talk about often with our customers is there is this digital gap, that gap which is, what customers expect and what companies believe they're providing, and how there is a discrepancy there. And so what's interesting in these early findings is that gap seems to be growing as customers are kind of getting into some new and innovative technology, but not necessarily always sure on how to implement it and how to go to market. What are your thoughts as we kind of walk through there?
Yeah, and one of the things that gap is one that really bugs me, because we see those gaps in other types of things, right? When people do internal quality reviews, there's a gap with what they think of versus customer sat type scores. And we don't have a stat here on IVR, and I think if we could find one, it would probably show a pretty glaring gap, right? And we're going to talk more about that on the voice channel. So we've got all the digital activity that's reflecting these issues of perceptions that internal people have versus what the customers have. And I think there's just this glaring Lake Wobegon view on the inside, and the customer view is not there. And if you're not a Prairie Home Companion fan, in Lake Wobegon everybody's above average, right? So there's this view of we're doing it great, but maybe we're not there yet. So we got to really kind of work through that. And I think we'll hopefully share a lot of ideas with people about how they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it talks to this kind of love-hate relationship, right, that customers have with self-service experiences. We know we know the benefits can bring. We know the simplicity of it when it works well, but we also know the challenges, right, when it doesn't work well. So as you kind of consult with your clients, what are some of those things that you hear back, and how do you advise them to kind of close this digital gap? And what are some of the things that, really bubble up for you?
Yeah, so this love-hate thing is something that it is obviously tied to that gap we were just talking about with the statistics. But I think if we each can put ourselves in the consumer seat for a second, right? Some of us really just don't want to call or even text or chat with somebody, right? We want to go to those apps, and we think about the convenience of things like Amazon or Lyft or Uber or things like that we just think of as inherently self-service. Even a lot of financial services and things like that now. So we know it's possible, and our graphic here on the left, we almost don't even pause to celebrate, because we know it can be done on certain companies' channels, right? But then we have the hate side of this relationship where people, agents suffer, right? We're going to talk about agent experience in this webinar, and agents suffer the brunt of that because people are frustrated with difficult paths to get to them, and dead ends or difficult applications in terms of trying to complete what they're trying to do. And so we struggle with that in the contact center space, and all of us as professionals in the contact center space, when we talk to people, they almost always have stories to tell us about their bad experiences, right? So the statistics that show these great hopes that people have in self-service and wanting to move forward, that's all well and good, but we've got to recognize the challenges that are here and that our customers are going through. And we also have to look at the things like the demographics of the customers and the nature of the contact types. I think that's been one of the challenges with self-service and all the hope that we put in it, that sometimes we try too hard, right, to force people into using things that aren't going to be a fit for particular people. I always think of my mom, she's not going to use any of these self-service channels, or the nature of the issue. Some of your stats already showed that, when it's a complex thing, a difficult thing, people just want to talk to somebody, and they want that to be an easy path to do that. So we've got a lot of opportunities here to kind of fix those gaps and get rid of the hate side of this self-service relationship that people tend to have, right?
Yeah, good point. And I think we'll try and cover some of those points as we get towards the end of this presentation. But yeah, very good stuff. Very good stuff. Well, as we talk about this digital gap, customer perception versus company perception, I think there is recognition in organizations that gap exists. And of course, that recognition and the need to support a broadening set of expectations around customer self-service is fueling this next investment in self-service. As we say, these companies are doubling down now on that digital strategy. And as we look across the top here, some of the stats that came back, 47% of organizations plan to expand their digital capabilities. As your study showed as well, the number one item, the number one technology priority that came out of your survey was that customers are going to focus this year and in the coming years to implement and improve self-service. So again, recognizing that they've started down that journey, they've maybe implemented that first set of chatbots, they've implemented that first RPA bot, but really taking that to scale and making that successful and deflecting calls into the contact center. There's still a lot of lessons learned and battle scars that they have. So an additional investment to improve that is a focus. And then of course, as we look further out into the distance, we talk about 15% of customer interactions will be automated by AI, and we'll kind of use that to transition next. But talk a little bit about starting, kind of left to right. What are some of those expansion opportunities that customers are looking at with regards to self-service? And then, what is not necessarily going that well, and where are they focusing on improving?
Yeah, and I think the expansion part first, and we've got the lingo there, right? The multi-channel, the omni-channel, and now people are starting to say multi-experience, right? Because we're dealing with these pretty impressive interfaces and everything that can be multi-channel, omni-channel, whatever you want to call it, right? Through smartphones and the like. So there's this expansion, right? Nothing goes away, right? People keep adding text, chat, social media, right? That they don't get rid of things. And in fact, a lot of people had expectations that their phone channels would decline. And what we're seeing with a lot of people is the overall volume is staying the same or still going up just based on growth of contacts, growth of customer base, and that sort of thing. So this expansion has to be done in a context of very much strategically looking at how do I make sure all these things fit together, right? And then with the focus on implementing and improving self-service, of course, executives love it, right? They are eager to get that, thinking, okay, contacts are going to go away. I don't have to hire as many people, or I can let attrition even bring our number of people down. And you see there in the middle, the IVR, the web, the mobile, and now the bots, of course, tons of excitement on that. So everybody's like, can't we invest in that to solve some of our problems, to reduce the volumes and the workloads and the costs? Mm-hmm. So back to that great hopes that we have in the self-service. And then the last one I find pretty interesting because there's so much hype around artificial intelligence. And so 15% on the one hand is kind of small, but on the other hand, there's really not that much traction yet, right? There's a lot of thinking about it and planning for it and hoping it will make a big impact. And we kind of put that qualifier there about proceed with caution, right? Because it doesn't fit everywhere. Organizations have to have the resources and the right vendor partners and a lot of things go into that. And we'll talk more about those pieces. But we're really starting to see where that excitement and enthusiasm for AI is going to have an opportunity to have an impact, I think.
Yeah, I think the point you brought up about kind of, this move from multi to omni to multi-experience, the fact that we do keep adding channels and none really go away, right? It's not as if the customer says, yeah, no, you don't need to text me, or I don't need SMS anymore. It's I want all of these and I want them on my time and I want them 24 hours a day. And, company initiatives and company silos have organizations and teams kind of going out and providing those new channels. But I think going back to the original stat, 7 out of 10 consumers prioritize consistent experience across those channels. Only 29% say they get it. That is a significant pain point. So I think it's not just enough to offer the channels. It's just as important, if not more important, to connect those channels as we think about kind of where we're headed in the future.
Right, right.
And the last thing I'll say here is as we get into the kind of the AI, I think it is a proceed with caution. It's definitely, not a magic wand as much as, every organization wants it to be. AI is still something that needs to be thought through carefully. It still is a system that needs to learn. It's not smart on day one. And so, picking off little use cases and really taking this kind of use case by use case is a great way to start down that path. But this belief that all of a sudden the magical AI umbrella will just fall into your organization and automate your entire transaction basis is definitely not the case. All right, so well, with 15% targeted for, AI automation, that leaves us, Lori, with 85% or potentially more interactions that won't necessarily be fully automated, or may start off in a self-service channel, but due to complexity or need, or the need for human interaction, they will escalate at some point in time into a live interaction, be it chat or phone. And so, as we kind of looked out over the data sphere, a couple important stats came out that just validated that dependency that the customer base, that their customers have on making that live channel accessible. So 64% believe that they should have easy access to agents. So if I am in a self-service channel, I'm in ordering a phone through my mobile channel, I want to be able to quickly be able to connect to an agent, and I want to do that without having to go through 32 prompts, right? 1 in 3 say, not only do I want to have quick access to that agent, but I want them to be knowledgeable and friendly. And furthermore, 40% want that knowledgeable and friendly agent to also be able to handle complicated interactions. So I think the summary here is live interactions aren't going away. And quite honestly, as the easy stuff goes to self-service, these interactions get more and more complicated for these agents.
Yeah, and I think it, as we talk about customer experience, right, creating a great customer journey, and we have a lot of buzzwords in our industry, low level of effort, right? We want high scores on customer sat or net promoter, right? All those things point to these kind of statistics, right? Make it easy for people to get to somebody. Make sure it's somebody who can solve their problem and do so in a friendly kind of way. And certainly on those complicated ones, right? So this ties in very much with the customer experience message that our industry is so focused on. But as our title here says, we can't forget about the agents, right? Because all those things, the success really very much depends on those agents and their ability to do their job effectively. And obviously that's a complex thing. There's a lot of moving parts there with hiring, training, et cetera. But I think as we dive in here and talk more about this, I think this is kind of where we're having that pivot to say, yes, that great customer experience is important, but let's look at how we help these agents do these things to meet the customer where they want to be met, right? Where they want to be helped.
Absolutely.
So that's a good segue into our next slide, I think,
Absolutely.
to talk a little.
So those customer expectations then, kind of easy escalation, knowledgeable and friendly, available, at the right time to solve these complex interactions. Are those reasonable expectations? Are there other expectations? What's kind of the customer journey like? And can you simplify kind of their expectations along that journey? I thought this was an interesting slide that you and I had a chance to talk about.
Yeah, and I use this when I'm doing seminars and that, and I talk to people about what are your expectations, right? And the message here is that these are very reasonable expectations, and quite frankly, a lot of them, they've gotten more complex as we've added channels, but they kind of go way back, right? Mm-hmm. So as you look across this, and we like to, again, in our industry, talk about the customer journey, right? The customer starts by making a channel selection. And that, as we've mentioned, that's more and more diverse now, right? So we want to give them choice, and all of us as consumers want that. The authentication process should be simple, and then we shouldn't have to start over, and we certainly shouldn't have to go through a interrogation process to get authenticated and be able to address our need, right? We want to get routed to the right place. We don't want to get transferred once we get there, right? I've had calls where, as a consumer, I'm just like, no, as they're about to send me off to the next person. That's a very reasonable expectation to not want that next step to occur. And then the contact handling, what people want is a personalized resolution, right? They want to feel like, hey, you know a little bit about me, you can handle this efficiently and effectively. And then that last step of the follow-up and escalation, that the real-time assistance and follow-through occurs, right? So if you're saying you're going to do something on my behalf, or somebody else is going to do something in a downstream process, that's going to happen. And all of these are tied to two kind of fundamental pivotal things here, right? It's having the data and using it throughout in an intelligent way, right? And that's really where we get into, Scott, we've talked about the acronym here, RPA, right? I know you're going to talk more about that, but the robotic process automation that we're going to lay out here, right? This is where tools do a better job than people at dealing with massive amounts of data about a lot of different contacts and situations and customers. And so that's really what we wanted to leverage to make this a better outcome, because what I've laid out there is pretty much what everybody wants from a customer perspective, and it's what every contact center wants to deliver, right?
Yeah.
So kind of use that as our guidepost, if you will, for what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, from the customer's point of view, this is simple, right? It's pretty linear flow. You know, this is all you need to do. This is simple, company A, you know, and what I'm asking for. But I think if you really peel this back, right, and look at the channels and the technology and the people and the departments in the organization, often siloed, that are supporting kind of this journey, that's really where the complexity again. And so we talk a little bit about tools and how employees, when they take over, you know, once this routing occurs to that live interaction, the big question back to you, and I think that was so fascinating about the survey that came back, is, you know, our organizations, given the complexity of the systems, given the complexity of this multi-channel, omni-channel, multi-experience world, are we empowering, you know, our employees to support these elevated expectations? So as the simple gets offloaded to the bots, the complexity comes into agents, and often, as we talked about, you know, the frustrated customer who has been bounced around a channel or three comes into that contact center, and they want you to know exactly where they've been and what's happened. You know, are we really giving them the tools to be successful? And so, as we looked at, you know, the two important statistics in your 2019 challenges, you know, number one would say no. Bad desktop tools was the number one challenge that organizations came back on your survey that said, we do not have the tools that we need to empower employees to be able to solve this problem. And further point, number two, is that employee attrition is our second biggest problem. So we've got really bad tools that we're giving our employees, and we continue to churn, you know, consistently. So oftentimes that person that answers that phone probably is 2 weeks out of training. And by the way, that was a 3-month training process. And, you know, they're just learning how to navigate a very complex desktop. So, you know, I thought this was a really interesting statistics coming back as to, you know, how do we expect employees to take over that smooth customer service seamless experience when we're giving them the tools that don't necessarily support them. And I think, you know, curious to get your thoughts on this. You know, the reason behind that, we've talked a little bit about this, but is it the failure to connect kind of this employee experience with customer experience? You know, we've got some statistics on here that show, you know, why you should care about employee experience and why that's instrumental into driving that seamless and consistent, frustration-less customer experience. But, you know, what are your thoughts on that link? Is it just something you can't put an ROI on, kind of the increased customer experience, or I'm sorry, employee experience? Or is it just something that gets deprioritized? Just what's your feedback on why that's not involved?
Well, it's interesting. I think about years ago there was a company that used a salmon as their kind of their theme, and it said they were swimming against the stream because the positioning was, hey, if we take care of our employees, they'll take care of our customers, and everything else will follow. And I think that we've progressed since then. You know, there are other companies that really demonstrate that in the industry and show that you can focus on your employees. I think Zappos is one that comes to mind where people think, wow, they just do special things, right? And so there's a positive outcome from a brand and a profitability perspective. What I think that we have to think about now, and I did a quick little run through of some of the articles I've written this year as I was thinking about the infographic and the messaging here for the webinar as well. And I kind of chuckled because it's like I think we're heading into the year of the agent, right? You might say we've been in the decade of the customer, or maybe, you know, throughout this century we've been all about, hey, customer, and that's great, but we haven't delivered on the promises of that, right? So I'd like to kind of see this shift to the year of the customer, or the year of the agent in 2020. say, yes, it is time to invest. And the quote on the bottom of this slide, I put that together as I was reviewing the challenges and priorities results, because what we found is, and we're going to talk more about this, the number one priority was to improve employee engagement and empowerment. And I truly believe that you can't engage and empower them until you unburden them.
Yeah,
right? They are overburdened.
Absolutely. I think that's awesome. And I think as we go into, there's always a reaction to the survey that comes back that, how are we going to solve for employee attrition? And I'm sure in your surveys consistently, number one was we're going to work on employee engagement, but the how we're going to do that, or at least, outside of some, employee surveys and kind of doing those soft skill, focus things, what you bring back is that, look, maybe you're addressing employee engagement the wrong way, and maybe, truly unburdening them by giving them better tools, better ability to be successful with their customers is probably a different way to look at it, rather than kind of the historical approach to improving empowerment.
Yeah, and I think it's adding it to the mix, right? And I just there's going to be an article coming out in December that it's all focused on how can technology tools help with employee engagement, kind of trying to get people to take a different look at that, right? Because that's not typically where we've looked.
Right.
And we'll talk more about that as we go through here. But this slide kind of pulls out the common theme of our top challenges and priorities from this year's survey, and I think a lot of them basically point to the desktop, right? If you think about your environment and where agents struggle, we go in and do discovery all the time, and I'll talk more about this as we get into our actions, but we do discovery. We run focus groups with agents. We observe contacts. We look at how they get feedback and all those sorts of things. And I've coined what I call the O factor, the overwhelmed, right? And people are often overwhelmed, and it manifests in a lot of ways. They leave during training sometimes, or they get onto the phones and quit early, or struggle and have to get some remedial training. Handle times are too high. The time to proficiency is too long. There's errors creeping in. All of that is a function of some of these difficulties that people face at the desktop. And then part of what we see when we do those observations is people get kind of numb from doing the repetitive things all day. And so they lose kind of their edge, right? They aren't as sharp. We're fresh. We sit down and observe with someone for a few hours. We're more fresh than they are. And we sit there and hear and see the errors creeping in. So we're going to talk about how you need to fix those things, and you will likely have more highly engaged agents on every contact, right? There's kind of the global engagement, but there's also the engagement and empowerment that occurs on every contact. And that's certainly an opportunity that we see as people start to kind of fix some of these problems that the desktop is creating, to make it a hard job for what the pay is, and then that trickles into what you were just talking about with the attrition and things.
Well, and this is the one that kind of, I talked about the background and the history behind our effort here, but I think this was the big disconnect for me, is seeing, number one, the challenge here is a lack of bad desktop tools. And the fact, as I scrolled through your priorities list, okay, well, I would expect that, just like, attrition, the counter to high attrition is improve engagement. But I didn't see improved desktop tools. It wasn't until we got to priority number 9. So, that, what does that really tell us? Is it just that this desktop improvement with CRM, with workforce optimization, billions of dollars have been spent on technology, maybe not necessarily to directly help the agent, but to give them new tools to be able to service customers. But at the end of the day, after those billions of dollars and, a desktop 10 years ago and looking at it today, it's still the same. Disparate technologies, mainframes, the latest web apps, and everything in between. But it's fascinating that, for a number one priority or challenge, there's not a counter to that on the priority side. So just interesting.
And I think for many it has felt like a boiling the ocean problem. And we'll talk about the ways you can tackle it. But I would also say that's part of our pivot point now, right? That people are realizing that they can tackle it and they need to tackle it, right? So let's shift into that kind of a discussion about how we can unburden the agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where kind of the next survey that you had really focused on the future of contact centers and kind of the optimism with a dose of caution. This is pretty exciting, right? Because it's not necessarily looking at the same old tools, the same old technologies to try and solve those age-old desktop problems. I think what's exciting about the time we're in now, when we talk about AI and we talk about RPA, we talk about bots and self-service, so many new capabilities that are coming in to the market that really started off, really driving the self-service and the digital initiatives. But as we take many of those capabilities and bring those back into the contact center, we see a lot of opportunity to improve that desktop and improve that agent's interaction with the desktop to help them service the customers. And so, your survey, very interesting data that came back around the top 3 intelligent automation technologies predicted to make an impact in the contact center. Number one, bots, and there's many types, so I'll ask you to kind of clarify there. RPA, robotic process automation, that ability to kind of go in and without the need of APIs or other integration methods, you can go in and automate a lot of the manual activities that agents would otherwise have to place a customer on hold, while they navigate these applications and update different systems. And then, of course, analytics, a lot of power in there. And then as we look at kind of moving forward and what companies and how many companies are looking at AI to help solve their problems in the coming years, 91% of organizations are going to deploy AI in the next 3 years, and 86% here that we'll transition with in a minute. But talk about, everybody's worried, and there's this general buzz about concern that AI will take our jobs, that automation will take jobs. I think it's really encouraging to see that we're going to be in this hybrid automation space for a long time, and the need for kind of humans and technology to collaborate together to provide that better customer experience. I think that's exciting that, as we look into the contact center, companies are looking to these technologies to, again, simplify that agent and customer experience. So talk a little bit about the top 3, though, here on the left side, the data that you got back, maybe a little insight into industry specifics. What did you see in here that was interesting?
Yeah, and I'll also tie it to that the improvement of the frontline jobs, right? So the bots is the number one. I'll tie that back to what we talked about earlier with the self-service, right? So especially out of executive, I think, directives and because of the challenges contact center space, there's still that, hey, let's get some better self-service, right? And so the bots, whether they're voice bot or a chat bot, somebody interacting off of a website with text-based or a text SMS type of bot, those are things people are putting a lot of credence in, like this is going to have an impact, right? We think we can really defer some contacts. The RPA, the agent assistance part, then is going to help people through the handling once the contacts, and those ones we talked about earlier, the ones where it's somebody that doesn't want to use self-service or can't use self-service, has fallen through for whatever reason. And then, of course, analytics is kind of an underpinning of so many things. So a lot of enthusiasm around those things. And that lower right stat there, the 86%, as you said, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second here, but I love that positive perspective is there about we're going to make it better for the frontline employees. I was at an outsourcer yesterday, and think of that business. They're basically in the business of handling contacts, right? It's all about people. Yep. And he looks at the guy I was talking to that was the leader there, he looks at the opportunity with bots and with automation to, one, help people with the self-service, and two, to deliver what he referred to as white glove service, right? So help those agents really handle those complex things and that are going to come through and make it a better job as a result, right? Everybody wants to succeed on those contacts, the customer and the agent. And so I think there's a lot of excitement and energy around what could happen down the road as we apply these technologies. The one on this slide that I think is our little bit of a flag, I mean, overall, very positive. So these were binary questions about, will it be better or worse, basically, or neutral for the employees, for the customers, and the company. And so as you go down, you see that there's a little echelon going there. And when we get down to the company and asked about the impact on the bottom line, right, the return on investment, the financial business case, and better service, we had a little more skepticism. So the yellow is our skeptics, right? And you see there the risk of spending money on technology that doesn't deliver the expected results. And so I think that it's easy for us to look at the history of implementing technology. You just talked about it, Scott. They've spent millions on the desktop, right, CRM and other things, and not gotten the delivered results that they want. And so I think this is a poised, we have to get it right and not fall short of the goals that have been set for a technology. I'll also throw in just real quickly, we broke these perspectives out by contact center practitioners versus what we called industry experts, consultants, analysts, vendors. And the latter was the most skeptical, right? So the ones who arguably know the most about the technology and what it's going to deliver in the future had the most skepticism on that question. And I think that's, again, a concern that there's a lot to getting it right. Yeah. You know, it's powerful technology when you talk about bots and RPA and AI and all these things that excite us, but we got to get it right. And so that's, I think, where we move into our set of 5 things in the infographic that kind of our call to action for everybody that's on the webinar here of what you can do about all this.
Yeah, very good transition. So that gets us into our, top 5. I know you and I, when we talk through this, we probably have a top 20 or a top 30, just depends on how long we have. But we jotted down 5 kind of actionable items here that, as we've implemented technology with customers, as you've gone out and consulted with your clients, where you've seen some of the most value and really the fast value, right? I think that digital gap that we talked about and kind of the challenge that companies have in kind of believing the savings are there is, the expectation that it's just drop and go. AI bots, just put them in place and they run by themselves and we can automate 30% of our business. But, I think taking a more careful approach, but one that's very tactical yet strategic, and kind of building iteratively over time and adding more and more use cases. And so that's really what we wanted to do here, is give you kind of 5 takeaways of successful strategies that we've seen in implementing intelligent automation in these organizations. So let's start with number 1. This is kind of the no-brainer. We talk about the number of times we've sat behind a contact center agent and observed how they work. This is a stat that comes from online, that 8 of 10 agent activities can be automated, meaning 8 out of 10 processes or micro tasks that an agent will perform while they're on the phone with a customer. Maybe it's an address change, maybe it's updating a policy, maybe it's going and just transferring a balance. Those are purely algorithmic business rule steps that, if you had a robot that knew how to do that, that was trained how to do that, and you could click a button, that robot could execute that task. Tremendous opportunity to do that, given the disparity, or I should say the disparate systems that are sitting on an agent's desktop. So there's been a lot of hype over the last 5 years around unattended RPA, these robots that are kind of sitting in the back office on a server, kind of fully automating tasks. But what we see is, as they've fallen short of expectations, the industry is moving back to kind of a personal bot for every employee in the organization. And, this is what we call an attended RPA bot. And think about an agent as they start their day, they walk into their cube and they click a button to log into their applications. There's a robot that wakes up and takes all their credentials from every application and automatically logs into those applications for them. That's just one example of how you can train some of these RPA attended robots to do some very simple automations. But as you multiply that across 3,000 agents and multiply that 5 or 6 times a day as these applications time out, it's a great opportunity to automate these manual tasks. So as you've I know done a number of discovery sessions, what are some of the opportunities you see out there as well, Lori?
Yeah, a couple of them that are listed here: the on-hold automation, the automated notes. I think of things like people pasting between apps or jotting things in little notepads, whether they're electronic or physical. And I think about looking at what's happening during the various segments of a call, right? Why are people putting customers on hold? When they go into their wrap-up state or after call work, what are they doing then, right? And are there opportunities? So I mentioned that we sit and do observations. Do that in your own center. Sit down and just watch with an eye towards that, or hold a focus group. Ask the agents. They know what are those repetitive things that they wish they didn't have to do over and over and over. And I think those are the kinds of things you want to drive, the tasks that they're doing during those weird intervals, right? I've
Mhm.
put someone on hold. I've gone into wrap up. Why is it too long? And your example there of the automated notes, we can get better, crisper, more consistent notes through
Absolutely.
automation. We think of that as unstructured data. And again, when I do observations, I'm often cringing at watching people create very, very different types of unstructured data in those notes. So
Exactly.
let's try and make it a bit more structured through automation.
Yeah, very good. And there's, there are hundreds of these opportunities. I think the secret sauce here is to, look across departments. So, as we go into these contact centers, there's a lot of different specialized groups or segmentation based on certain call types. What you're really looking for is, across those disparate teams to really get your volume and impact up. You're looking for those micro processes that are consistent. So you're not having to look for automating an entire call, for example, right? And the interaction with those
Yep.
applications. You're looking for these real small bite-sized nuggets that cascade and are consistent across, 1,000 workers. And it doesn't take but, 10 to 15-second benefit to justify kind of the training of these bots and deploying those to the contact center. So tremendous opportunities here and just kind of work iteratively through it, but a great opportunity to jump in and bring value quickly to contact center. All right, number 2, I know this is one of your favorite topics, putting knowledge at their fingertips and doing it fast. So 44% of organizations are prioritizing improvements in their knowledge base as we look at 2019, and I'm sure that will be consistent as we go forward, as we talk about complexity of processes that are coming into the call center. And, our recommendation here is really that's the power of some of the AI solutions that are out there where you can really let AI do a lot of that heavy lifting and search your knowledge base for relevant information to provide it at the right time to your agents, as opposed to kind of having them look for that data. So it's this movement from, going and searching and pushing to pull it's going from pull to push actually. So instead of agents having to navigate through, 10,000 different knowledge base articles while the customer's on hold, let AI be the guide and bring that information to those agents and provide it almost in an automated guidance flow. So I know this is your passionate topic, though. Jump on a couple of these other bullet points and share some stories.
Yeah. And again, it's something I've brought out in a few different articles. We have seen such bad knowledge tools at the desktop, right? People have cluttered, not well-maintained SharePoint sites. They have portals and putting up the air quotes that they've built out, and there's often a disconnect between the agents in the trenches and what they're doing and how they're seeking information, and what the people who have built out those things are providing, and so they struggle. They often turn to their neighbors or the little cheat sheets on their desk. So one of the things, again, we always look for in our observations, if they don't have a paper-free desk, what are they looking at, right? And so the middle one, the compelling ROI, this is something I've done in an article as an example on how do you do your ROI for technology. Knowledge management is probably the easiest one to build, right? To say this is going to get at handle time. Business cases are pretty much about, if you're looking at cost savings, how do I defer calls, not have to have a call, or shorten them? And boy, there's such a great opportunity on both fronts, really, but the first target being that handle time reduction, as you described, less poking around and trying to find it and reading through articles and all that sort of thing. But then you think about getting the right answer, that FCR, first contact resolution, so that we can help the customer solve it, be done, right? And not have the follow-ups and the additional questions. So, and the removing the crutches, there's a variety of crutches, right? My neighbor, my cheat sheet, whatever, right? That's not necessarily accurate and up to date and the most efficient and effective way to get an answer to a customer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It would be very interesting to go deep within kind of the 44% here and see how they're planning on investments. But for me, it's you've achieved your goal when that crutch has been removed from the agent and information comes to them and they don't have to search for it. So it's almost like
Right,
the
right.
removal of the dependency of that knowledge base. That's truly when you've kind of hit your stride and we've gotten to a different place with this
Right,
desktop. Very
right.
cool.
And
All right.
a simple indicator is if agents have to leave their desk to find an answer, then you really know you got an opportunity.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, number three, address the end-to-end process. We hear end-to-end a lot, depending on, whether you're talking back office workflow, whether you're talking customer interactions. What we're talking about here is really going back to the statistic that says, look, at some point in that self-service interaction, that customer may want to reach out to a live person, either live chat or, a live phone call. And so, in today's world with these omni-channel requests and expectations from customers, a company's ability to provide a very seamless and effortless escalation to that agent, where that agent has the knowledge they need, they have the personalization support they need, they have the knowledge base information they need to support that customer and kind of take right over from that bot experience. 60% of those escalations fail to pass that test. And so, as we talk with clients and as we go out there and discuss the importance of this, it's really about kind of understanding the platforms and the availability that says, you can build a point solution cobbled strategy where you stitch all of these different bots and you stitch all of these different components together, and hopefully that'll connect the customer journey. But really looking at a platform that provides kind of, the ability to not only manage that self-service interaction and omni-channel, but be able to move that into an agent and do that consistently with context, a warm transfer, as we call it. That is going to help you address a lot of that digital gap that we talk about. So, in your experience, Lori, what are you seeing with your clients, and is this a common problem that they see?
Yeah. And I'll bring up two things that are really, to me, the key topics that we get into with people about this. One, this is kind of one of the places where omni-channel, or now that new phrase multi-experience, comes into play, right? It is across channels, and that is self-service channels and people channels, right? So two words that get used with that is seamless and integrated, right? So it's truly got to create a seamless, integrated experience for the customer, right? So that's back to that customer journey example I gave earlier as they walk through. And then the second point is around what we refer to as the ecosystem, right? No contact center stands in isolation. Right. And in fact, we kind of view them as the center of the universe when it comes to an organization, right? Because they're impacted by so many other parts of the business, and they rely on so many other parts of the business. And so that bot at the desktop may actually be helping to move a task to a back office group to do some follow through, to trigger an action, or to follow up with the customer on something that has some specialization required for it, right? So we think of the escalation from a bot to a person, but then potentially a person to a person, right? And that's that ecosystem side of it. So this is all about the end-to-end, think omni-channel, crossing channels, and think about where else in the ecosystem I've got to pull people in and make that seamless and integrated for the customer.
Absolutely. The best self-service interaction can be for naught if, when they want to get to a live chat or a live agent, that handoff doesn't occur, right? And everything, that entire interaction now has to be repeated. You've lost all that goodwill that you had in the previous session. So, this one continues to escalate to the top of our customers' requirements. All right. Next, you talked about sticky notes and papers and desktops and the hot mess. I love this image in the bottom left. This is typically, you and I have been looking at desktops probably more than we'd care to look at for many years here. But I'm surprised that even in today's environment, I go sit behind agents and it still looks the same. The applications are different. You've not removed applications. There seem to be just more of them. 19 is the average number of apps that an agent uses to support their customers on a weekly basis. And there's some really nice opportunities as we think about customer expectations as they interact with self-service. Imagine you gave your customers a self-service experience the same way your agents had to interact with their desktop applications. And so now, if we think about bringing some of those self-service capabilities, that idea of UX design, RPA bots, AI, and kind of brought those together into a customer service desktop, could we help them, can we give them the same kind of look and feel, almost give agents a self-service experience, and do that through, a much improved UI, and then the supporting intelligent automation technology behind it that simplifies their work. So, I'm sure you're no stranger to this bottom left. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and this goes back to my O factor, right? The overwhelmed agent. So whether it's training or first out on the desk, or they've got an interaction type that they only get 3 times a month, right? And it just showed up at their desk. There's all kinds of different scenarios there that create that feeling of I'm overwhelmed, and that contribute to the long handle times, the errors, the training being too long, the time to proficiency being too long, all those things. So that's back to that business case, right? The business case to improve the desktop is incredibly compelling because it's going to shorten handle times. It's going to reduce errors and rework. It's probably going to add to your retention of agents because they're not going to quit in training or when they first get on the phones, because they're going to feel like they can succeed. And like you said, it's a welcoming interface, much like they use as a consumer, versus an interface that just feels like it's a cluttered mess and how do I deal with this? So
Exactly.
pretty exciting opportunity, I think. And that 19, I mean, probably everyone listening on this webinar can shake their head and go, yeah, we have, and fill in the blank. It's a big number of how many apps they have, and they know they need to clean that up.
Exactly. Excellent. All right. Last but not least, number 5. Oh, the silos. Has digital transformation built more silos, or has it helped take down some silos? It's interesting as we specifically talking about RPA. RPA came out as this, quick, cheap, and easy tool for the business where you can kind of leave IT in the dust and go build your own bots and, kind of that macro culture of old. But as we look at a lot of the statistics from the early adopters, the success rates with automation projects when IT is part of that upfront planning process is key, and the numbers do not lie. Automation, AI, RPA, these should not be excuses for the business to go rogue. These are technologies that can improve business and IT agility to deliver customer and employee benefits. And I think that's a big takeaway as we talk with customers and clients, that it's easy to be pulled away with this beautiful, euphoric world of business makes all these changes. But quite honestly, as implementing technology for many years, it's never that simple. And a collaborative effort is critical if you want to be successful in the long term.
Yeah, it's a drum I've beat pretty much my entire career of work together, better together. The teamwork message of IT and the business working hand in hand, and cloud solutions and bots that are specific to one channel or another. All these things kind of make people think, oh, I can do this in this piece, right? But you really need to work together. And work together across all phases there. The plan, execute, support that we put on this chart is really to make you mindful of that every step of the way, right? Don't start planning and then, we'll get IT involved later, right? Get them involved early, work together in execution, and then understand what has to happen in support, because it's a different world and you're still needing to work together to optimize, to apply it to the changes that are occurring, whether it's business changes, IT changes, process changes. It's all phases of that technology life cycle that we need that collaborative mindset and go with less silos. And I think, like you said, Scott, there is a risk we've created more silos with all the different channels and the tools and the cloud and all those things. So no silos needs to be a mantra.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, very good. Well, that takes us to the next session. We just wanted to help dip into those 5 points. Of course, there's an hour plus worth of dialogue behind each one of those, but hopefully it gave the audience just a sample of some of the areas that we see and we recommend as we go into the discovery phase and recommend solutions for customers as it relates to intelligent automation for agents and customers. Thought we'd open it up. We've got a few minutes left. Rochelle, if you had any questions that came through, we could kind of open the Q&A line up, and Lori and I could tackle a few questions if you have them.
Well, absolutely. Thank you guys. That was a very insightful webinar, and everything that you guys were talking about definitely resonates, I'm sure, with lots of people on this webinar. I'm going to give a few minutes just to make sure that people can submit all of their Q&As, but I do have a really good question regarding slide 5 and how did you define multi-channel, omnichannel, multi-experience, specifically in this case?
Great question. Lori, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I'll just quickly. So I think historically people talked about multi-channel, meaning it's not just about phone calls. It's about when we started having emails in the contact center, and then other text-based interactions like web chat, and then of course social media, text, SMS, all that sort of thing. Probably about, I don't know, 5 years ago, multi-channel kind of transitioned into the terminology omni-channel. I believe that was a marketing effort in the industry, because that seamless integrated that I talked about mantra didn't really change. It's just that multi-channel, when we were trying to tackle it with that label on it, it proved to be difficult, and a lot of companies stood those things up in silos. So as the industry tried again another push to get that seamless integrated, they kind of relabeled it omni-channel, said you got to deliver all these, and it's got to be a common experience and that sort of thing for customers. And then I think the multi-experience is kind of the new thing. Scott, you can talk more about that Gartner and others are starting to beat that drum with the user interfaces and the differences that we're seeing with self-service tools and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, Gartner introduced that term in their IT Expo conference a few weeks ago. But I think it's fascinating. They're one example, or they had a couple examples. One of them was, Domino's, for example, offers their customers 15 different experiences to order a pizza. So that could be through your smartwatch, it could be through your phone, it could be through the web, it could be through your personal assistant, it could be through Siri, Alexa, etc. So as kind of omni-channel expands, it's really moving into this multi-experience that involves not just the interface, but also brings our senses and virtual reality into play too. So how are you going to offer different ways that again your customer can experience your organization or that particular product? So more to come on that front, but some pretty interesting growth and opportunities as we look at multi-experience in the future.
Thanks, Scott.
One quick, I don't want to interrupt.
I
Oh, go ahead.
will quote Shakespeare: "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." Right. So whatever we call this thing,
Yes.
the goals are still the same, right? To get that seamless, integrated experience that the customer expects and deserves.
Yes.
One question. I know we're 2 minutes at the top, almost at the top of the hour. Does it work for very small contact centers like 20 agents?
Absolutely. I think again, these are not technologies that are $1 billion investments or $1 million or even $500,000 investments. I think what's so exciting about kind of the intelligent automation technology out there is that you don't have to start and automate your entire operations. Some of the things we talked about around robotic process automation, intelligent guidance, these things you can get started for at a relatively low cost and have a very big impact, because it doesn't involve a lot of necessarily IT services and integration points. It offers you a very quick way to kind of integrate into any system and automate manual processes. So, depending on which piece of technology or which capability you're talking about, there's a lot of opportunity for you in a small, medium, or large enterprise to leverage this technology to make some quick impacts. So,
Awesome.
technology for anybody for sure.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add is the business case approach is similar. It's just you've got to apply it against fewer agents and volume and see if you can offset that investment.
Exactly.
Before we wrap up the webinar and we say our goodbyes, I wanted to ask Lori if she could give us an awesome sneak peek at the 2020 surveys.
Yes, good question. Good question.
Yeah, so the 2020 survey is that we're collecting data for another week or so. And we encourage all of our listeners to participate if you haven't already. I will tell you in the challenges category, we have a pretty heavy, tight race at the top between attrition and a bad desktop. So that sounds familiar, huh, Scott?
Yeah.
And in the priorities, process improvement, self-service, and employee engagement are kind of neck and neck, all above 20%. And so we're eager to see kind of where we land when the survey closes, but that gives people a sense that the things we've just talked about for an hour will certainly ring true in 2020, and it's a good time to start thinking about how you can improve your agent's world.
Great. Thanks, Lori. And just a note on the replay email that we send out to y'all. There'll be a link to this challenges and priorities survey. I suggest that you get out there, and it'd be great to get your feedback. I'm sure Lori would appreciate you having a chance in filling that out. And of course, with that, you'll get the results from the 2020 survey. There's a lot of great insights there. And we'll also include a link to the infographic that we've been talking about throughout the outline here. So hopefully that'll be beneficial as well. And with that, I think, Rochelle, that'll do it for us on this Tuesday.
Yes, that concludes our webinar entitled 5 Ways Intelligent Automation Optimizes Customer and Agent Experience. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to respond to you off the record. Have a great afternoon. Talk to you all later.